the biggest thing in any relationship is trust.
How does one hire people like this?
For hiring, be clear on 2 things that the person should do at the end of 2 years.
So much of talk of D&I these days.
Labor participation rates for females have fallen from 35% to as low as 10-11%.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people say that these are like the top 3 traits of an entrepreneur.
The guy who doesn't lose is the guy who keeps getting up.
Welcome to Visionaries Uncensored, an honest conversation with leading entrepreneurs who have successfully created a business venture and are leading experts in their own field. Today we're having a conversation with my dear friend and mentor, Vipul, who has been a very successful entrepreneur who has set up recruitment companies in the past and amongst his friends is known as a problem solver for all sorts of problems, anything to do with business, or sometimes even family issues. When did the proverbial bug, the entrepreneur bug, bite you, and how did it happen?
So, when I was maybe 6 or 7, my mother's brothers all had these fancy cars, and we guys would have a Fiat and an Ambassador. And I would tell my mother that, how come we don't have these fancy cars? And my mother would tell me that, my brothers do a business and your dad's an army officer. So if you want to have these fancy cars, you have to be a businessman. So it actually went to an extent where when I was in class 12, I told my dad I don't want to study anymore. I want to start my own business. And my dad said, no, nothing doing. Finish your studies. So when I finished my class 12, I told my dad I don't want to graduate. I want to start my own business. So he insisted that I do my graduation. And even though I could have done an MBA, but so to answer your question, maybe when I was 7 or 8, I decided that I'm going to work for myself.
That's really interesting. I think you'd seen in almost all cases of successful first generation entrepreneurs, there's always been this huge fire that has guided and kind of pivoting from that fire a little bit. So what car do you have now?
I'd much rather not talk about it, but yeah, it's there.
Great. So I remember you talking about having done something in NIFT also. How did that play into your desire to set up a business?
So my inspiration since childhood were my mother's brothers. Both, in fact, 3 of them were very successful. 1 was in the US, 2 were in India. And that's the only thing I knew. I mean, I just knew that if you had to do well in life, you had to start an export business and everything else would fall into place. So NIFT actually came into being because of that, because of the fact that I thought that being a garment exporter was the way to do well in life.
Makes sense. And did you end up working in the garment space at all?
Yeah, for about 3.5 or almost 4 years. I worked between starting from Bangladesh, Dubai, New York, Mexico, Jordan. In fact, the garment trade took me across almost 18 countries across the world where I've stayed. These are places where I would have stayed for more than 2 to 3 months, and it was quite an interesting experience. I don't think in those 4 years that I was in the garment trade that I would have slept more than 3 to 4 hours on any working day.
Well, that's something else. How did that pivot into your first business, which I know of your first business, which was in the edtech space from garments? Was that coming back to India, or was there some other reason?
So when I was in the US, I was with a cousin of mine who was doing something in the education space, and that's where using technology for education seemed an interesting thought. When I came back to India in '98, my first interest or inclination was when I was looking for another business was to do something around education, and that's how I got this opportunity to partner with and take a franchisee of what was called IIS Infotech then, and then I think they called themselves multiple other names. So That's how I started Web City in Noida with my best friend from NIFT, and we worked towards educating people on how to make websites, and that's where the journey started.
And this is 1998.
Yes.
This is before internet was
Yes.
fancy. This is before internet was on everybody's sort
Yeah,
of
I mean,
lips.
I remember, you know, I don't know, maybe you might have seen heard this sound of which went like, which
The
was
dial-up.
which was, yeah. So we used to connect using that, and you know, I remember one of my partner's cousin was an IITian, and he would come and talk about how internet's going to change things and inspire us. So it was quite interesting, and I think it set us up quite well.
Yeah. What do you think about the sort of internet education or online education space in India right now? And in my mind, there are different aspects of it. There's one clearly which is variations of AppTech and NIT, which are internet coaching institutes. Then there are these internet-based technology-based institutes who basically teach you the same things but using internet as a platform. Where do you see this business evolving and going forward from here?
So because I've been associated with an EdTech fund, I can tell you that, you know, each kind of education that we look at has its own place. For example, the school and college education sets a rigor. You know, it helps you build habits, it helps you build a network, it helps you connect with people. So that's where there is a huge place for that. In addition to, of course, what they teach.
Yeah.
It could be that maybe you don't use all of it at the same time, but you would use some part of it at some point. When you look at the technical space, you know, when you talk about the NITs and the AppTechs of the place, world, what they do is they make you ready for a specific task, a specific job, whether it's a design school, a photography school. So they also have their place. The only, I think the only difference between the formal education and these colleges which are offering a shorter program is the depth of the learning. Then the third bit is the online space. The challenge with online largely is that you need a really driven student.
Yep.
You know, and if a person doesn't have that drive, you know, in an environment where the interaction is limited, it becomes difficult. But now with AI coming in, there are a lot of changes happening in that space. So it's an interesting space to watch out for, and it probably will be a good way to train and retrain people.
Yeah, and I think we all using large chunks of online training in our respective organizations.
Absolutely,
also.
yeah.
So great, but so garments, online training, recruitment. How did that sort of and you know that bit happen? So how did recruitment come? I mean, I know the story. I think I've asked you this at least 20 times, and I tell this to anyone I know because I think this is one of my absolute favorite business stories. But if you could share it for our viewers,
Sure.
The first hire and then the Elixir journey thereon.
Sure. So you know, I give my parents a lot of credit for the fact that I went to army school. My friends would change every 3 years.
Yeah.
You had a general's son and let's say someone whose dad is not even an officer. They'd all be studying in the same environment. So it made you very adaptable. When my internet education business was not doing well, as in the business was doing all right, but me and my partner were not getting along. You know, we had this opportunity to place our student that once you finish the course, we'll help you get jobs. I think that's where it was. You know, the intent was to help the students get jobs. We got this opportunity from Compunal. There was a person called Sanjay Kumar who was leading Compunal. He knew one of my friends. He connected us. He asked us for 3 people. I worked on a Sunday and found those 3 people, drove them to his office on a Monday, and by the end of the day, in the evening, these 3 people were offered, and he was just kind enough to send me a check of 42,000, and that's how my recruitment journey started.
I think this is one story I tell every new person who joins my organization also. I think it's not just, I mean, you make it sound so simple and easy, but I think there's this huge amount of love and dedication you have for the people you've placed, the recruitment function itself, which I've always just enjoyed having conversations with you.
So there's a very interesting story. I did this work for one day, and we got a revenue of 42,000 rupees. And I was 26 at that point of time. I just did a simple math. I said 1 day of work, 42,000, just multiplied by 300 days. So I said 1.2 crores is what I'll easily be able to make. And over a period of time, maybe I get better, so maybe I'll be able to make more. So that's how, with the 42,000 rupees, I started Elixir along with Mohit. And we hired our first person at about, I think, 5,000 or 6,000 a month. 1,500 a month was our expense. So we were spending, I think, about 7 or maybe 8,000 rupees a month. 3 or 4 months happened, and all that money went away, and we didn't make any money. And then I ran into a close friend, and he said, "What are you doing?" So I said, "I'm running a recruiting business." I asked him, "What do you do?" And he said, "I run a company called Matrix Cellular." So he said, "I'm looking for a sales guy. Can you find it for me?" I said, "I'll find the person for you, but can you pay me today?" So he said, "Sure." And that's how we got this 3-month, 4-month lease of life. And in those 3-4 months, then work started falling into place. We did about 14 or 15 lakhs in the first year. We did about 56, 57 lakhs in the second year or our first complete year. And then we tripled pretty much every year, for the next 7 to 8 years, and the company grew massively. That's where we were. And in between, then I bought my partner out. After I bought him out, we got a JV with an Italian company called GI Group. It was almost a $3 billion group. You got to see how larger companies worked, larger companies operated. We got a CEO who was an expat. We were constantly making trips outside. So the team got a lot of exposure. We got a lot of growth. And it was quite an interesting ride.
I was lucky enough to be a part of that journey, the growth, the exponential growth. I think when I joined in, we were about 36 odd people. And I think those were some of the sort of best working days of my life. We would sit close together because we were quite a few of us in the same office. I think each one of us was very inspired by you and just wanted to kind of make sure we were growing together. But that being said, and this is something that I've not been able to replicate fully, but there were these amazing people we had around us. I'm going to say you were able to hire current persons being kept out, but there were some amazing people that were there. What do you think you were doing differently from some other companies in the same space who, if I may call it that, had a more transactional approach to people? I think the average age of a person in Elixir, especially anybody who reported directly to you, was about 10 years. I don't think anybody wanted to leave once they started working with you. So what were you doing differently? What did you see differently in people when you hired? And then more interestingly, I would love to know, why did you hire me?
Very interesting question. I'll go with the first bit. I think when an organization does well, it is not one person. It is the organization as a whole. I think what we did right at that point of time was we were all friends. I mean, we got along, we had a good time. We had a clear idea that we were making a difference. We were growing an organization. And I think when you are in an environment where everybody is doing well, you end up doing well yourself, because it is sometimes, just by watching the other person, you get. So I think we were very ahead of the curve. We were constantly innovating, constantly challenging ourselves. I think we got a lot of client love because we were young people, we were hungry, we wanted to create a mark. So I think when we hired people, that's what we were looking for, right from our selection process. And I think that's why selection process is a very important thing. So anyone we were hiring, we were asking them to make a very cumbersome presentation, and they would come in and give a detailed presentation. And only someone who was really hungry, who wanted to do well, would come and make that presentation. So I can tell you that, when I look back, we would have hired a few hundred people, if not more. I can't think of a single hiring mistake. I can't think of a person who we hired and I look back and say, why did we hire this person? And I think it was largely because, we held hands and each person lifted the other person. So I think that's where it was. I think when you came in, you came in with these attributes. I think all of them. You were driven. You presented yourself. We were a very casual organization in terms of how we would walk into office. And I still remember how you came in. How you were dressed, how you presented yourself, and it was good because we always wanted diversity. So we were constantly looking for people, who were different from us. Sometimes it really bothered us in the because someone who's very different from you, it takes some acceptance. Especially, we would have people, who would come in with a thick Bengali accent, or people from down south, and then maybe on the other side we have someone who could not relate to that person. So the initial bit always was a challenge, but when you got that diversity in, the result was magical. And I have a lot of belief for diversity. I believe having a diverse organization, where everyone's not thinking the same way, and you are humble or trusting enough to trust each other to accept that diversity, it makes a lot of difference. And I think those are the things that helped us do well as an organization.
Do you think one could still manage to replicate that spirit in the current environment where I think a lot of that was because we were close quarters, right? We were looking at each other all the time. We were talking to each other all the time. How does one do that in the current context of work from home, work from multiple locations? We have people who are operating out of 17 different locations right now. In one of your companies. How do you manage to sort of keep that spirit of working together, succeeding together, continue?
So I think just a small correction. It's not 17. It probably is a lot many more locations, because I don't even know where people are, because a lot of times I'm talking to someone and in the morning.
17 countries.
In the morning they are in one location, in the evening. Like I was talking to my Nigeria partner, and she was sitting in a flight. And by the time our call gets over and I have my next call with her tomorrow morning, she'll be in the US. Yeah. So it is very dynamic. But on your point, the biggest thing in any relationship is trust. Trust gets built when you communicate with each other openly, when you don't doubt each other's intent. That is something we strive for. In my current organization also, our HR head last month won, the HR leader award, and one of the reasons she won the award was, for example, in our company we have a system where all policies are made by a policy committee. So any policy you want changed, like you don't want to work 5 days but you want to work 4 days, you go to the policy committee, and the policy committee has somebody from the top management, middle management, entry level, and even an intern, people from the support teams, and they look at every policy and make recommendations. So what we've done and what we've worked really hard on is, one, making sure that the organization is run by all of us. So when you go and you talk to people and you tell them that, look, you want, let's say, a 30% increment, and maybe you deserve it, but the way the organization is performing, this is what it is, people understand. And as long as you give them that respect, and give them that trust, you get that trust back. And then you don't need to monitor them because they are running the organization as if it's their own organization. And that's what helps. In my current organization, again, I've been blessed. The initial 15, 20 people we started the organization with, most of them are still with the organizations. The few who have left still are connected with us and are constantly helping us out. So I think trust, respect, giving people the freedom to say what they feel is extremely important. We, in our organization, even though we are fully virtual, we do some initiatives, like we run a company connect. So every senior person talks to one person every week to get a perspective from them on how we should run the organization differently. We don't talk to them to give our point of view, we talk to them to hear their point of view. We every week we have like a all hands on board where we discuss what is going well, what is not going well. And so I think all these things have helped us actually run a very connected organization.
So, and just pivoting a little bit from there, looking at it from the other people's perspective, how does one hire people like this? What would be your recommendation to people who are listening to us on their sort of working on their hiring plans for this year? What kind of people should they hire? What should they look for in terms of the personality traits? Or do you feel there are people who are better trained to help them hire? What are your thoughts on it?
So I feel when you're hiring a person, you're hiring a person who's a variable.
Yeah.
And then you're hiring them for a role which is fixed.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times one is not able to balance that dichotomy. So I think there are certain simple things one should do. Before hiring, be clear on what are two things, just two. Don't make it three and don't make it one. Two things that the person should do at the end of 2 years, which will tell you whether you made a good hire or not. If that is clear to you, at least a large part of the problem is solved. A lot of times when I'm talking to my clients, the challenges are as follows. Number one, they will come and say that they want 6 things.
Yeah.
When you ask them to prioritize, they are able to, but it takes time.
Yeah.
Then usually in a client's office, there are 3-4 stakeholders for one role. When you talk to the other stakeholders, all of them actually don't have the same expectation. So aligning, hiring, just the two important things, very important. The second thing is, you should write down what are the 3 immediate challenges that a person will face upon joining. Because if a person does not have experience in working in that environment where those 3 similar challenges are, you don't know whether the person will succeed or not. And lastly, you should know what is the value system of your organization. Like for example, the value system of our organization is that we allow people the flexibility to work on their terms.
Yeah.
So that is the reason why 75% of the staff in our company is are ladies. A lot of them have young kids, and we encourage them that look, if I were to have a meeting with one of my colleagues and it's at 1:30 and she tells me that look, my son's going to come between 1:30 and 3 and I can't take a meeting, I respect that. Now I have to have same people in my organization who have the same kind of respect.
Absolutely.
So then having respect becomes very important. Having understanding for flexibility. So understanding what's the DNA of your organization and matching it with the DNA of the person becomes very important. And once you do that, there are enough people.
Yeah.
I think a mistake one ends up making a lot of times is hiring people just on the skill set.
Yes,
He's worked
absolutely.
in company A, has skill set B, let's hire.
Yeah.
And then the person ends up being a disaster because they're not tuned to your way of working.
I totally agree. I think the personality and culture fit should have equal importance rather than kind of just having a CTQ approach to, hey, years of experience, graduation, whatever, and then making it work. Moving on to a favorite question of mine that I've been asking you for many years, which you have successfully evaded. So I will not ask you that question, but let me pivot that question a little bit. So you did look at a couple of strategic partners at Elixir. And so the first question is what made you decide on GI among the few others? And obviously we were a very transparent organization, so you never hid the fact that you were looking at potential partners, and we all knew that they were potential suitors were coming in. But then what made you select GI? One, two. Maybe answer that one first, and then we'll come to question two, which will make you squirm.
So I think, to be quite honest, it seemed like by mid 2008, it did seem like there was going to be a problem, and it seemed like something will happen. In India, we weren't talking about it, but globally, there was a lot of chatter that things are going to go south. Honestly, GI was the first one who was ready to move very quickly. It was run by Stefano. He was quick in his decision making. Maurizio, who was his right hand man, he trusted him completely. So the decision making was quick, and I think that worked in their favor. The second was, I think culturally, they were also very aligned to us at that point of time. We were very particular that we will not let go of any people. We will still expand. So they were aligned on all that, and he was also looking to grow because he was looking to list, and that's why.
This definitely has been one of my favorite questions to not just ask you, but just try to corner and get an answer. But you always evaded it, so I'm going to not ask you this time. But when GI ended up buying out Elixir, you exit the company. I'm assuming you were left with a sizable chunk of change. What were your thoughts on kind of managing those funds? This is 2012, if I remember it right. Still early days. Sort of family offices were not a very popular construct. People were still, I think HNI investments were still kind of becoming an on vogue thing with the banks. How did you do it? How did you manage it?
So I think the managing of the money bit is not that difficult. There are a lot of good money managers in the market. They will come and give you a lot of suggestions, and then there are other people who are professional experts who can tell you which manager to go with. I think the bigger transition on selling a business, or even when you're running your own business, is how do you manage your own internal office, in the sense that having a good person. The minute you're out, you make a sale, you're out in the papers, so you start getting a lot of inward traffic. And you don't know who to go with for what. Now people are reaching out to you for investments. There are many opportunities that are opening up. You think that I can, let me do a little here and a little there. And you lose focus. You're also afraid that you've made this money, you don't want to lose it, so you're afraid of making immediately a very big bet. So I think when I look at it, and I don't even know if I'm answering your question correctly. I think one of the things I should have probably done at that point of time was hire someone as a good executive assistant, or a good for the lack of a better word, chief of staff, or someone in the CEO's office, who could have worked with me on a lot of these proposals, who could have told me that, look, at end of the day, the decision is mine. But I feel I spent a lot of time, energy and effort doing things which, maybe at that point of time hiring someone, and I don't know how much the salaries were then, but in today's salary, hiring someone at a 25-30 lakh a year salary would have made a world of difference to the way I had operated, the way I had run. And I think that was a big miss. And today, whenever I'm talking to my friends or people I know, who are in a similar situation, that's the first thing I tell them. Tell them that, look, go hire a chief of staff, an executive assistant, depending on where your organization is, or someone to run the MD's office, or an entrepreneur in residence. And hiring that can make a fundamental difference to the way you operate your company. And I feel that's why your company is really good. I mean, I've seen you do this, for me, for a lot of my friends, and I've seen the difference it made.
I think you're right on that. I think a lot of times it's just about having the entrepreneur's energy has been focused on like the strategy at hand rather than a lot of inflow of data that comes in. And I think if you just have somebody who can be the gatekeeper of that information, kind of differentiates the critical from the crucial, runs projects for you, there's a huge amount of difference.
Yeah, I mean, run projects is a big one.
Yeah.
Like I was, so much of my energy went into one or two projects that, I would come home drained and exhausted and then take a really important decision just out of exhaustion.
Yeah.
Because I had no time, where a lot of this urgent stuff was overwhelmingly taking over. And, a simple thing like booking a flight ticket, which of course is, is important. But
yeah.
I mean, we were running this project as Hum Communities in
Yeah.
Simapuri. I mean, it was 42 kilometers away. I was going there, and honestly, it was important to go there, but it was not important to go there daily.
Yeah.
And I feel just not having that right person made such a big difference. And so I wish you had recommended this to me at that point of time.
Yeah, well, we always try to do what we can when we can. So that's one aspect of it. Kind of pivoting back to the family office, which is a slightly different animal, kind of a more holistic approach to like a better word, generational wealth. Do you feel that's something that's important for? I mean, obviously the larger ones already have it in place. Be it the Daburs, be it the. In fact, Grapevine suggests that even Mr. Ambani's recently created a fairly complex family office to manage his individual wealth. But what about people who are perhaps in the sort of the mid-section, third generation people who have sort of investments across the world, in India, but are not necessarily that big? Do you think a family office is like a great approach for them?
So, I don't think I'm qualified enough, honestly, to answer this. Clearly, but I'll take a stab at it.
Yeah.
Clearly, when you have the kind of wealth that these people have, it is a no-brainer. When you are smaller, the difficulty is in attracting and retaining the right talent. So I think if you can do a mix where you have a smart person in house who can do some bit of the work for you, but you also then need to partner with a professional,
Yeah.
Who would have the right skills. So it'll probably need to be a mix, but I don't think I'm competent enough to answer this question.
No, I think it's a very valid point. I think somebody need to kind of draw the line and then figure out whether it makes sense to keep it in-house or kind of just put it out. What have been the and a lot of this is just because I like sitting next to you and keep listening to you and over here and in all business conversations you have, because I feel there's a lot of learning in there and translation and eavesdrop on every conversation you have. But that being said, I remember us talking about you having invested, you were the early investors in Milk Basket, you also have someone in Blue Tokai. What made you choose these specific sort of targets? Did you do due diligence? How did you choose them?
So I think there is no one answer. Of course, I think made in excess of maybe about 60 odd investments. There's no one common theme. The common theme, I think, number one would be that you like the entrepreneur that you are investing with. You are mostly when you're doing a smaller amount, you're investing with someone you trust, someone you know. When you're doing larger amounts, I think the space they are in, the kind of ambition, cohesiveness, the team. I think there's a lot of things. There's no one straight answer that I can give. But I think if you don't like the entrepreneur, you don't make the investment. I mean, it's simple as that.
That totally makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about wowJobs. Why wow? Jobs obviously is a no-brainer, but why wowJobs?
So It's for everything in my life, I have some colleague to thank. We went and as Elixir, we went and bought a back office in Dehradun, when we bought that back office, the back office was not part of the deal. When GI bought Elixir, they didn't buy the back office. So I had to remove the back office and put it into a new company. So I reached out to Shobit, who ex-colleague I'm extremely fond of, and he said, we have to make it in the name of a new company. What should I call? So he said, what should I call the company? I said, whatever you like, just call him that. So he said, you use the word wow a lot. So I said, okay, make it wow. And that's how the company was called Wow Softech Private Limited. Yeah. And then when we were looking to start something there, after our exit, so the company was called Wow Softech, and we were doing recruiting. So that's how wowJobs came into being.
What would you consider to be, if at all, the sort of fundamental difference between the way Elixir was, we don't know how it is, so the way Elixir was, and the way Wow is. Is there any difference between the two companies, your approach to those two companies, or what are your thoughts?
So I think the number one difference for me personally is at Elixir I was 26. Wow, I'm 50.
But 50 now, you started wowJobs a few years ago.
Yeah. Hopefully you mature, you become a little more patient, you're more willing to listen to other people. You also probably get a little more stuck in your ways. So I would say mostly for me, these would be the changes. But if I look at it, the other changes are in Elixir, we were like this bunch of people in a tight room, always, like you said, running out of space and taking more space and growing very rapidly. Yeah. And never having money, so constantly just trying to survive. At wowJobs, things are a little more organized. The business runs out of Dehradun, so actually, I would give my colleague Nidhi the credit for building it for the initial 6-7 years, because I was in Delhi and she was building the team. We've also got our partners in Dubai, Nigeria, and other places. So they put in a lot of effort. So I think a lot of credit for the growth goes to all these people. As far as I am concerned, I have observed it from a distance for the first 6-7 years. It's only during COVID, when we shifted remote, that I actually got very connected with the company, and so I think that's probably the difference for me.
Just wondering, there's so much of talk of D&I these days. It's like the buzzword post-COVID. Everybody wants to do diversity campaigns. Everybody wants to hire diversity candidates. Everybody has hired a D&I person. I remember us working on a diversity campaign way back 2008-9, if memory serves right. What are your thoughts? I mean, you were one of the very early proponents of evangelists of diversity in the workforce. We were, in fact, I was the diversity person in Elixir. I think we were essentially a female workforce, female-driven organization. But what are your thoughts on this whole sort of focus on D&I in the current corporate construct?
So I think the pendulum kind of swung extremely towards D&I. I think after George Floyd, and there was this whole movement, and people were reaching out to us, and there's a lot of conversation. Actually, some organizations have done great work. I don't want to take names, but a lot of them are our customers, where they went ahead and right from gender diversity to, even in India, hiring people from backward communities or religious minorities, to hiring people from the queer community, veterans, persons with disabilities, and these are all businesses we run. Right. So we've seen organizations do phenomenal work on that, but I now see the pendulum swinging maybe a little to the other way. I'm sure you are familiar with what's happened with the colleges in the US, where they've said that you can't do these preferences. But just to the question that you asked, an organization benefits immensely from having a diverse perspective. And there's tons of research which will tell you that the minute an organization, especially if you look at gender, crosses, let's say, a 28-29% threshold, magic starts happening. It quickly moves on to 50. Organizations which are at that 50-50, their productivity levels, employee retention levels, because you have a much larger pool to choose from. If you have a 90% male organization, that means 50% of the people you can't hire because nobody wants to join you.
Exactly.
So it makes a huge difference. And I think people should wake up. Like yesterday, I was at a friend's office, and this whole conversation was, in Bharuch to build a ladies only factory. And they said that, look, what about the heavy stuff?
Yeah.
And they said, look, that you can automate. You can get forklifts and the operators can.
Exactly.
So I'm really glad that it's coming into the mix, especially in India. Unfortunately, our labor participation rates for females have fallen from 35% to, I think I've heard numbers as low as 10-11%.
Yeah.
I would suspect it's 15-16%. But 15-16% is also very low. I mean, even Saudi Arabia is at 26%.
Yeah. And this is post-COVID, right? The numbers kind of...
So a lot of females have fallen out of employment, and I think it is on all of us to encourage them to come back. Same for the queer community, and I think you are doing a phenomenal job at VNR, to promote that agenda of getting queer talent into work. So I think the larger theme of accepting people from all walks, getting that diversity, because one, it increases your pool, but also it gets a diversity of thought. So I think that is extremely critical, and anybody who's working towards that, I mean, I think they're doing a phenomenal job.
And I think it'd be like a good time to pivot into your investments into other organizations in the, I would say, the larger HR space, where you've invested a lot of your energies also in When. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, I love talking about When, because When is run by Kanika Vaswani. She, I think, some 3 or 4 years back, she was nominated by DBS and National University of Singapore as amongst the top 50 social entrepreneurs in Asia. She's done a great job in getting women back to work, especially a lot of women who've fallen out of employment because of care or because of migration, because of the husband's job, or because after childbirth, marriage. So every major event has led, and she's got some really interesting stats on that every major event in a lady's life leads to X number of people dropping out. And that's a large percentage. I mean, just our dream, of hitting 5 trillion, I would suspect, again, I don't have the math around it, but at least maybe 800 million to 1 trillion can probably just come if we get an equal participation from women, which is there in Europe, which is there in the Western world. So she is doing a pretty good job on that. We also have, we have a company which is called Helm Communities, which is focused on the retiree workspace. Again, hugely underutilized talent pool. We are always struggling. You talk to anyone, and they're like, okay, we get the freshers, we don't get the top management. And then there's this huge pool of educated people who are available, and they're not being used.
Yeah.
So I think there is a lot to gain by both for the people as well as the organizations for getting them on.
I totally agree. In fact, I think we've had this conversation a few times on how I feel my dad is not utilizing his
I'm sure he'll not
abilities,
like you saying that here.
as much as I would want him to,
Yeah.
but I think he's got so much more to sort of give, and he's had a phenomenal life, and I think if nothing else, he can mentor a few senior people, just sitting at home. That's kind of the so interesting thing with you is even when I was working for you, I always thought of you as my mentor and guide, and even now when we partner together, I always think of you as a mentor and guide. What do you think about you makes it easy for people to go to you for guidance?
I think I'm just lucky that I am around people who are willing to listen, and that's where it is. I do want to correct you. You never worked for me. You worked with me. So we've always worked as colleagues. I mean, I think that's the spirit. I think that spirit of collaboration, of believing that everyone's equal, that you guys can learn from each other, being genuinely interested in the other person. I think a lot of time, being genuinely committed to their growth. I feel when we are not able to retain people because we're not able to give them the kind of growth that they want, it really saddens me.
Yep.
Because I do feel that we should be able to do that. So I think as long as you're committed to the people, they will, and you're genuine with your intent. And a lot of times you make mistakes. A lot of times you go and I remember last year sometime we got into a huge spot of bother because we overexpanded a certain part of our business and that industry totally crashed. And we're losing a lot of money. So I went back to everyone and I said, look, for a few months we won't be able to make payroll. And on their own they came back and said, look, we are ready to take like a 20%, 30%, 40%. Some people even took a 50% cut. Luckily 2 months later we were out of it. We paid everyone. But the fact is that trust that you build in the organization where everyone feels connected to the organization, I think makes or breaks the organization.
And just pivoting the question a little bit, what do you think are I mean, a lot of people say that these are like the top 3 traits of an entrepreneur, or these are top 5 traits of an entrepreneur. Do you think that's really true? Or an entrepreneur can be anyone with a mix of certain skills?
I think, I don't remember who said that, but it was one of these famous boxers who said that, the guy who doesn't lose is the guy who keeps getting up. So I think as an entrepreneur, you should be ready to get up. And why will you get up?
Yeah.
You will get up only if you have that belief that you'll win. So people who carry that mindset that, look, whatever happens, one day I'll do it, one day or rather we'll do it. And I think so the first thing is that, I think if you carry that in your heart, that I'm in the right space, I'm doing the right thing, and if I work properly, it will happen. You will. So I think that's number one. Number 2 is your intent. Your intent can never be that let me make a quick buck of someone. Let me somehow or the other. The intent has to be, let me do good to my customer. Let me do the best I can for them. And it's all right. I know if I take care of them, they will take care of me. So I think that is extremely important. Third thing, which I've already said enough, there has to be complete and total transparency in your organization. You should be willing to take a punch from your team guys. You should be willing to take a punch for them. And that's how you grow. The people who start thinking that, I feel, I've seen this with a lot of my leaders also sometimes, they think now that I've become a leader, I'm right. And that's what sets you up for failure. So you have to have that humility to know that anybody can be right and you can learn from everyone. And I think if you have that. And lastly, because of the way our business is, we are blessed because we end up meeting a lot of clients. And because of that, there's a lot of outside-in learning.
Yep.
A lot of times people get cocooned in their own space. So being open to that outside, like I'm part of the EO network, for example. There's so much of outside-in learning coming because you're constantly seeing how other organizations are doing, how they're scaling up. And it just helps you become better as an organization.
That's wonderful. And with that mantra at hand, thank you so much, Vipul, for spending time with us. And
thank you for having me
we'll
over.
continue talking.
I really enjoyed myself.
Same here.
Thank you.
Thank you.